What I'd done to this thing with the geometry, put stress in places maybe that Cannondale hadn't tested or wouldn't be good, wouldn't have passed their QC process back in the day. Maybe it could lead to a cracked frame somewhere, pivots not working the way they should, and all of those are absolutely valid concerns, but I don't care. All right, welcome out to another video. This is a little different than we normally do on the channel. Today, we're actually gonna do a ride video. This might be the first, it also might be the last, we'll see. You'll have to let me know down in the comments what you think of this format for this channel. It's not my favorite. I mean, I like watching ride videos, but I'm not much of a rider. So the main purpose though, and the reason I'm doing it is, number one, to say thank you, because this channel just passed 20,000 subscribers and that means a lot to me. And so I promised a ride video where I would answer your questions, and also to take this guy out for a ride. This is the Super V, of course, that I restored in our last video, which I was really proud of, really happy with. Probably my favorite restore that I've ever done, for sure. So I'm gonna take this out, and in honor of 20,000 subscribers, we're gonna take it for a 20-mile ride. We're just at the local trail system where I plan on just doing loops not too far away from the car, because you know what? Things go wrong. Hopefully nothing does. I think I've made this pretty bulletproof, but you just never know. So we'll stay close to the car just in case something blows up. But in the meantime, we'll head out, go for a ride. I'm gonna try to answer all of your questions. We had a lot of really great questions, both about this restoration, but also about the channel in general. And I'll go through those and answer them while we ride. Hopefully I'm not too winded. I'm not in as good a shape as some of the other channels who do ride videos. But we'll see how it goes. And if you like this format, let me know in the comments. Or if you don't, if you hate it, that's fine too. I won't be the slightest bit offended, but I love the feedback. So thanks for watching. Let's hit the trails. All right, we're gonna do questions about the bike first, about the build. And that's the majority of questions. And then at the very end, we will answer any questions that you guys asked about restoration process, about the channel. But since I'm not in as good a shape as other channels who do ride videos, I'm gonna wait to do the talking to the downhill. So I'm gonna turn this off until we get to the summit of this first lap. All right, I think we're near enough the top that I can talk without being too winded. It's kind of flat up here. I want to start at the top of the bike, the front top, and go to the bottom rear and address all of your questions and concerns. There were a lot. Really good comments, suggestions, a lot of valid points. Things that, honestly enough, that I would do it different if I were to do it again. So let's go through all that. The first thing I want to address is the elephant in the room, or maybe the snake pit in the room, this mess of a cable management system. Yeah, I don't normally do this. I was kind of in a hurry making some stack adjustments, and it's not very tidy, but I will get that sorted. I knew I'd get comments though if I didn't say something. Maybe I still will. The next thing is the grips. I like these grips a lot for their looks. They're fine, they feel fine, but not sure these are the grips that I would ride with. My favorite grips I'll link to in the description, the ones I absolutely love. Next, let's talk about the headset. This is the Works Components offset headset. Got a lot of questions about this. So the way these work is that they, if you notice, let's see if I can stop for a second, point this out to you. If you notice, there's more space on the front at the top here than there's the back. That's because the headset sits inside of the head tube at an offset angle. It's a 2 degree, this one. You can get them at different degrees of slackness. And it fits great in that old, head tube for the head shock used to fit in. I don't remember the size right off, but I do have a link to it in the description. But the Works makes headsets that fit all kind of older bikes, so you can get a bit more slack. There are also, and they're pretty nice, but they're a little bit more on the expensive side. There are some cheaper options and some that are sold in the States. These are made in England, but those, they didn't have any that would fit this head tube. Next up, let's talk about the fork. Man, I wish I had $1 for everybody who commented on hating the SR Suntour XSM shock or a fork that I picked for this. You guys, first off, I'm not a gear snob too much. I think SR Suntour, they definitely make some cheap stuff, but they also make riding available and suspension available to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. I don't mind using lower end parts on some builds to show people what they can do with less money, and taking, you know, choosing between a full rigid and a shock that's maybe slightly subpar. Yeah, I'm gonna pick suspension, guys. So, I mean, first off, keep in mind different people have different budgets. Try to be sensitive to that. Some of you are pretty harsh. But the second point I would make is that this is it's a straight tube. So I have to get a straight tube fork, and I wanted a 27.5 to make this a mullet setup, to get it a little bit back. I like mullets anyway, not just to get this bike a little more slack, but literally this is the only fork I could find, and it was used, that would fit, that was 27.5 with a straight tube. You know, I don't think many manufacturers are making this type of fork anymore, because, you know, most stuff is tapered these days. But in addition to that, you know, the combination of 27.5 and straight tube is, you know, there are some really cheap China brands that are unknown to me, and I would still prefer to go to SR Suntour to some of those. But yeah, I mean, the only thing that anyone's ever been able to show me, someone linked to an SRAM Loop SL fork. That looks really cool, but I'm not sure they make it anymore. It's certainly, you know, not available currently. So, you know, it is what it is. That's what we've got. A little drop here. Okay, so just hit the drop, and I can talk a little bit about this fork and how it handles. Yeah, I mean, it's not amazing, let's be honest. The rebound, well, its adjustment is kind of laughable, and it just pops back. Not quite as bad as the back shock, but we'll come back to that. So it's not ideal. I would prefer an air shock. I would prefer something a little nicer. I would also prefer to have bigger budgets when I do these projects. And I would prefer that there are actually components out there that you could buy. It's so hard to find things these days. So anyway, it is what it is. Hitting the downhill now. Let me talk a little bit about the ride quality. On the up, it feels wonderful, actually. You know, one thing you can do immediately to make a huge difference with these old bikes, if you got an old bike and you want to breathe just a little bit more life into it and you don't have a lot of money, shorten the stem, widen the bars. I've got a 780 millimeter handlebar on this and a shorter stem. I don't know if it's a 60 or 50 millimeter stem, and it immediately makes a difference as far as your control, and feels a lot better. If you want to do other things, you can slacken them out like I've done here, and that can also make it feel a little better. But for me, this is a fun ride. I would have no issue using this as my daily kind of bike at all, albeit I would make some other upgrades that I'll talk about maybe at the end, some other things if I were to do it again, and if I was building this for myself. But I really wouldn't have an issue, and this is coming from someone who rides a Pivot 429 2021. That bike is the nicest Cadillac of a bike. It is amazing, absolutely love it. I actually use it for downhill and enduro, whatever. I use it for everything, even though it doesn't have the, you know, the largest suspension in the world. But It feels so nice, it climbs so well. Anyway, this video is not about that bike. But even having said that, I don't mind riding a bike like this at all. This has actually been really fun. So working our way backwards, a lot of you talked about how the cables, I use these little, these, I don't know what you call them, I forget what they're called, but these little things right here that attach to the cable bosses that make cable routing a little easier. I actually don't love those. On the other side, I actually drilled out the cable bosses. That wasn't in the video, but you can, here, let me stop and show you. I actually drilled these guys out. I didn't put in the video because I did it after the paint job, so they don't look amazing, but then I just routed the cables through there. And I think that's what I would do in the future, and I will do in future builds, so that I don't have, you know, obviously so I can have hydraulic disc, but also so that I can not have the bare cable from the derailleur anywhere. So working our way back a little further, talk about the rear shock. I had to use the original vanilla coil. Didn't really have a choice, and that's because I could not find a shock anywhere that was the right size. This is a 135 eye to eye, and they don't make 135 eye to eye shocks anymore. The rears, yeah, so the rear shock is not great, right? I mean, it's pedal bob. I feel it right now, the pedal bob a little bit, but I'm an old school mountain biker, kind of used to that. It really doesn't bother me too much, although I'd prefer something with some adjustable rebound so that could get under control. Yeah, aside from those two things, I really like how this thing rides. Like I said, a lot of you were really concerned that I was using that, I don't even remember the brand, that kind of no-name cheap bottom bracket brand, and suggested that I should have used a Holotech 2 conversion. Yeah, that was, yeah, I mean, the hard part there is that I have this philosophy when I'm doing these rebuilds that I really, if I can, I really want to reuse everything I can from the original bike. In this case, the case of this bike, that wasn't a lot, right? I mean, I reused obviously the frame, but other than that, like, I had to throw away everything in the front. There was no reusing that. And, you know, some of you aptly noted that I removed the V-brake bosses. We'll come back to that. So there's a lot that I threw away on this bike. So I wanted to reuse those LX cranks because they were there and they worked. So that's why. So that bottom bracket, it's heavy. It's probably not gonna last. It's, you know, all those points are valid. Holotech 2 would have certainly been an upgrade, and I could have put nicer cranks on there. Yes, all good points. Just, you know, what do you want to do in the build? If it's your build, you do it that way. And maybe I will in the future do Holotech if I'm not wanting to preserve the square tapered cranks. But in this case, I wanted those. Some people didn't really like the white color scheme, which, you know, it's all just preference with color. I was not a fan of the sunburst that it had, the yellow and the orange. As I was just staring at the frame thinking what would be interesting, and I just had a glimpse of what it would look like white, black, and maybe a little bronze. But it was interesting because maybe it was subconscious. This bike was owned by the police department, the local police department at one point. So, you know, now it looks more like a police bike than it once was. The next thing we need to talk about on our tour around this bike is the dropper post. Lots of people concerned about the dropper post or questions about it. Of course, the Super V frame was never designed with the dropper post in mind because it didn't exist. So it is, you know, a bit unusual, I guess, to see one on here. But most people's concern was, does it hit or strike the rear triangle? And the answer is no. There's really good clearance. Even if I were shorter and this came down to even about right there, if you'll notice, the shock actually goes horizontally. So this will go that way, doesn't go up very much. So when you're putting these on, if you allow for a 1/2 inch or whatever, it should be fine. I don't think it will knock. The real concern, maybe it's a concern that someone brought up, is that the mechanism is exposed. And yeah, especially like around here where it gets really dusty, and if you're in muddy conditions, this is kind of a intricate little piece of gear, not meant to be exposed to the elements. So someone suggested maybe a little boot, making a little boot, zip ties and tubes would help. I haven't done that, but I think it's an excellent idea. Partially I haven't done it because it's not dusty at all. It's actually wonderful conditions because we've had rain, which was much needed down here. So not an issue right now, but I think that was an excellent idea. So thanks for whoever suggested that. Forgot your name. And then moving back a little further, we have our 1x11 drivetrain. Someone suggested that it would have been better to not do that, to stick with a 2x or whatever, because of the chainstay length. It's actually kind of short on these old bikes, and that can put a little bit of tension, or you know, lateral tension on the chain that's not good. I think that's a really good point that I just honestly didn't think about. However, for whatever reason, not because I'm any sort of mechanical genius, just out of sheer dumb luck, I guess, it seems to work great with where the front chainring is on the extremes. So the hardest and the easiest gear, the biggest and the smallest chainring, seems to do fine. There's a little bit of an angle there, but honestly, it's not as bad as some of the other bikes that I've done conversions on. I think it's pretty good. So, no, I'm not too concerned about that. The other concern, though, was when let me stop and point it out here. Oh, almost stepped in some cacti. That was close. All right, this guy right here, this bracket. You'll notice that there's a gap where this should be butted up against the frame, ideally. This little silver thing here. Someone pointed that out and said it wasn't safe and said it was a bad idea, blah, blah, blah. I'm not concerned at all because there are 3 bolts and a QR through the center, and the bolts are butted up against the frame down here, and it is nice and tight. It's not going anywhere. I'm not worried about this at all. Some good light Loctite on there. This thing's not budging, and the back brake seems to work a treat, as our British friends would say. It works great. Ideally, this would be butted up against the frame, yes. I did modify it a little bit. People got a little nervous when I was taking an angle grinder to the frame, but it wasn't snug enough, so I kind of had to. But I don't think it compromised anything because it was just a little bit on the aluminum, so I think we're okay. Although one person pointed out I should have adjusted, or I should have made changes to the actual bracket, not the frame. And yeah, I think that was a really good idea that I didn't even consider adjusting or modifying the bracket to fit the frame rather than the other way around. That would be ideal, but what you didn't see was on the other side of the frame, it kind of, the weld, it kind of bubbled out too far, so you couldn't get it flush. That's kind of one reason I had to grind it down a little bit. But yeah, in general, I think that's an excellent idea. The other thing that someone mentioned is I should have powder coated that adapter, and I totally should have. I didn't think about it until I was already long past the powder stage, and by then I was already set up for a different paint job. I just was lazy, I have to admit it, but you're right. I should have powder coated that also. So let's see, anything else on the bike? Oh yes, so something that would have solved the, whoops, where am I going? Did I go the wrong way? Get distracted. Maybe I'm going the right way. Okay, I'm going the right way. So what would have solved two problems. The problem of the 135mm eye-to-eye small rear shock, and the problem of short chainstay rear triangle, is to make this bike an Uber V. And a lot of you wondered why I didn't do that. Now, for the uninitiated, the Uber V was popular maybe 5 years after the Super V was originally popular. A lot of people made Uber Vs out of their Super Vs to give them longer and more relevant life. And that just meant that they would replace that rear triangle with a rear triangle from a Jekyll. That gave them a longer chainstay and allowed them to put bikers. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
You guys should invest in some helmets.
Yeah, no kidding. First timer.
Have a good one.
You too, man.
I'm that guy. They know. They don't need me to be their dad. Oh well. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes, they allow for a longer eye-to-eye, so you can have a bigger shock, a beefier shock on the back. I would have loved to do that. In fact, I still probably would if I could find one. Nobody seems to be selling, surprisingly, early Jekyll rear triangles. So if any of you have one kicking around, would love to buy it from you, maybe do a follow-up to this video where we try making it an Uber V. Please let me know. But yeah, I couldn't find one anywhere. I looked for, I put this build off for, maybe 4 months trying to find that rear triangle and just never could. Maybe if I waited another couple years, maybe I'd find one, but I was impatient to get this build going. So, nothing's permanent on it other than the brake bosses I so rudely removed. Some people really hated me doing that. Other than that, nothing's permanent. Could redo a lot of things. So, maybe we'll do that in the future. So I think that might be it when it comes to the actual bike itself. I can't think of any other questions going front to back. Of course, I've got my, oh yeah, there was one other question regarding pedals. Why didn't I put pedals on it in the video, the build video? Sometimes I do if the pedals help with the aesthetic of the bike, of the build, or if it's like a vintage build. But in the case of a bike like this, where I built it to be ridden, and it is for sale, maybe if someone wants to buy it. If not, I'll either continue to tinker with it, make an Uber V if I can, like I said, or maybe I'll donate it like I've done with some of my other bikes. But when you build a custom ride, usually people bring their own pedals. So that's why. I just looked at my notes and realized there were a couple more questions. The first was, why two different types of rotors? They noticed one were the bolted on kind, the other was the screw on kind, I forgot what they're called. That was because I had to have two different hubs. The front we had the through axle, and on the back we had the QR axle. So I had to have different hubs. That meant different disc technologies. That's all. Otherwise, yeah, I would have made them consistent. The big question though, the question of all questions that I also got a ton of times was, is it worth it? Was it worth it? Or people telling me that it wasn't worth it. That the bike was crap before, it's crap now, blah, blah, blah. And others wondering, should I do the same if I'm on a budget? Is it worth it to find an old frame, put, some money into making it new again? Is that better than buying new in the long run? And you guys, that is the ultimate question, but the only person that can answer that is you. It depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to just get a bike that will rock, that you'll love on a budget, then it's not worth it, I would say. I wouldn't do it. It would be better for you to get a good hardtail frame than a frame like this, because really, I mean, if we're honest, that rear suspension that I have, it's not a whole lot better than a hardtail. Let's just be honest about it. It does take the edge off, but it also creates some pedal bob. And at the end of the day, I think that, I don't know, some of you might just prefer to have a hardtail. And there's some really great hardtails out there. I would encourage you to go to the channel of my friend, Hardtail Party, to check out some of those. One of his reviews recently was on an awesome budget frame from BC Original. I think it's called the Podsole. Looks amazing. Looks like an awesome frame. I've never tried it, but I want to get one and do a build, try it out. It looks so awesome. And it's only a $450 US dollar frame. So that could be a really great option. Start there and then build it up. Of course, that's more than the $75 I spent on this, this frame, but I think it would probably be worth it. If your goal is to get the best ride experience. Of course, those are sold in Britain. And I don't know what the shipping cost would be to get them to the States. So if I were in the States, honestly, I would be looking at finding a Jamis Dragon frame, maybe slightly used. That's where I would probably start. Those are just solid hardtails. And I've heard the new ones are excellent. So, but there's a ton out there. But if your goal is nostalgia, you want a project and you want to ride, like if you want a bike that will be fun to work on and provide you with an excellent riding experience at the end, absolutely it's worth it to do this sort of build. But I think most of you who do that sort of thing already know that. You get it. I've had some people tell me it was a complete waste of time. Those people don't understand that for me, the joy is in the journey. Even if I had gone through every step of that restoration and at the end never made my money back, I still probably would have done it, because for me it's about the learning experience and I enjoy every second of the process. Obviously, powder coating and media blasting are so fun for me. That's like the adult version of coloring books for me. It's so therapeutic and mindful. I love that process, but really every single part of the process. I love watching a bike go from messy, crappy, you know, 1 foot in the scrap heap, to saving it. And those that don't agree with the way that I restored this, keep in mind that if I hadn't done what I did, that it would be in the landfill right now. I saved the bike. You might argue with my methods. You might not like the paint job, but you can't argue with the fact that there is a bike on a trail right now that wouldn't have been without my intervention. So that might sound overly dramatic, but I do feel strongly about it. Let's try to preserve what we've got rather than replace everything. How about we all have different philosophies, but in general, I feel like I'm doing a good thing. Anyway, I'm yammering on. Those are the questions about the bike itself. There were a couple questions about restoration in general in the channel. One of those was cracked frames. The fellow asked if it was worth it, or I guess not if it's worth it, but how I felt about repairing cracked frames. But he didn't get a lot of context, so I'm not sure if he meant, like, do I feel comfortable with it technically, or just like philosophically, like, is it a good idea? And yeah, I mean, I feel fine about it. It depends on the material, not aluminum. Aluminum is just absolutely too difficult. You could weld it, but then you have to heat treat it, and it's so time consuming and expensive that it's usually not worth it for do-it-yourselfers. It's not really feasible. So not aluminum, but steel and carbon, absolutely. On the carbon end, I'm actually working on a restoration right now, fixing a crack. Oh, you got a biker coming. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thanks.
Yep. On the carbon side, I'm actually doing a restore right now. My first time trying to repair carbon, and you know, I'm a little nervous. It's definitely a skill and a process that's new to me, so I'm taking my time. Probably taking too much time. I'm super nervous about it. Working on a Cannondale FS1 that had a cracked seat tube. So about ready to actually put the epoxy on, and I'm just nervous. But we'll see how that goes. Not only that, but I don't like painting carbon as much because obviously you can't powder coat, that would destroy it. But I'm not as good with the spray. In fact, I've only ever rattle can sprayed. So this would be the first time that I'll actually do a proper spray job. I have the equipment, I'm just not the nerves yet. So carbon's more difficult, especially because you just can't go to town sandblasting it like you can with steel and aluminum as much to get the paint off. So we'll see how that goes. Steel, I've done stick welding, but that's a far cry from TIG welding, and I'm not there yet. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Is there more?
Nope. Okay. Just talking to myself. Oh, us weird YouTubers. Anyway, what was I saying? TIG welding is not an expertise that I have, and I want to have it. It'd be awesome, but don't have the equipment, don't have the skills. Someday I will, definitely. It's on the list. And I even want to get into frame building at some point. But for now, still kind of perfecting the stuff that I am doing now. First on the list before that, as far as equipment or the upgrade, is getting a better powder coat system. Because it's, you know, the Eastwood powder coat, home powder coating system it's fine, it works, but I'm starting to see the limitations. Those professional ones are a lot more expensive. So that goes into our last question, and it's one I get a lot about. Oh, sorry.
There's that blind corner.
Yep. Question I get a lot is that, man, a lot of people going the other way today. That's unusual. Most people tend to go clockwise on this trail. Maybe I missed a memo on a route change. Anyway, yeah, I have a lot of equipment and it costs a lot of money. People want to know, did I do that for the channel, or is that because I do other stuff? And the answer is yeah. I mean, I bought that for the channel. You back up a year ago, a year and a half or whatever. And what happened was my two boys who you've seen on the channel, well, I have three boys, two of them got really into mountain biking. They're sort of obsessed. And for me, I took like a 20-year hiatus, only biked every once in a while until they got super into it. And as soon as they did, my wife did, I got back into it. And that's a lot of bikes, especially when you consider now my boys race enduro and cross country. That's two different bikes. So it's expensive and it's a lot of maintenance. I sometimes feel like a full-time bike mechanic with how hard they ride and how hard I ride. So I got sick of going in the shop. The shop's a good ways away. It's expensive. Right now they're so busy and backed up, and they were getting stuff wrong. Like, I just don't trust my local shops too much just because they're overworked and stressed out, and I don't know if they're qualified or not, but they've made too many mistakes. So I just decided to build my own kind of bike shop, learn all the skills myself, and also I wanted to save money long term by kind of making older bikes work for my kids. I found that they got just as excited when I would give them an old, like with my son, that old Jekyll that I completely restored, painted the colors he liked. He got more excited than that than he would have with a brand new bike. And I enjoyed the process more, and it's less landfill, that sort of thing. I was happy to do that. Of course, the equipment cost a lot of money, big investment, but I think this channel's done well, and that's thanks to you guys. We have we're about to pass 25,000 subscribers. By the time this video comes out, probably will have. That's great. It's not making back the money yet that I put in, but it will. I have another YouTube channel, and I know from experience that they can make money. The other channel I've had for 5 years with my wife, or maybe even longer now. It's Andrew and Deore. If you look it up, we did photography content for years, and that's, you know, building up a second channel. I knew what to do, knew how to make it so that it would get views and grow, and it's doing that. So anyway, I appreciate all you fine folks for subscribing, coming along for this journey, not just this journey today on this trail, but the journey of the channel. Would love to hear what you think about this format. I don't know that I will do many of these in the future, just because it's not my strength. I'm an adequate rider, but there are, you know, I think the build videos are much more exciting for all of you folks. But let me know what you think. Maybe I'll do more if there's enough of you that liked this. Either way, I hope you feel my gratitude. This really is a thank you video for all of you that have subscribed. You know, I don't know, what, about 3/4 through the ride, 15 miles by now. Truth be told, because I'm so in bad shape, I have broken this up into 2 rides. I did 10 miles yesterday. Started recording this video and did most of it, in fact, and then checked the footage and realized my GoPro was pointed too far down, so you couldn't even see the horizon. You're looking at my knees. And so I'm redoing it this morning and putting in the last 10. I wish I could have done 20 in one setting, but I'm just not there. Anyway, I think that's it though. I'm gonna concentrate on finishing the last 4 or 5 miles, and we'll see you guys in the next video.